Hey yo, what's up everybody? It's Overking here with a new video, and I want to talk about a game series we've all enjoyed. Well, at least if you're clicking on this video. The Skylanders franchise. Now, as we all know, Skylanders is a 6-game series. Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, Giants, Swap Force, Trap Team, Superchargers, and Imaginators. That has not gotten a new game in about 7 years since Imaginators in 2016. Which does hurt, and honestly, I'm not going to go into the fall of the series or why it failed, but what I want to look at is what would happen if we got a remake. Because looking at the two options we have for the new games is we get a remake of the series and then new games, or we jump straight into new games. But for both older and newer audiences, I feel like a remake of the games would be a lot more profitable and a lot better by a storytelling point of view. For us older fans, we could play the new games in HD, play them in better ways, as I will explain later in this video, as well as let newer fans get into the story that we have been immersed in these years. Now, for the first of my many topics today, I feel like I can cut this into 3 parts. Figures, how the games would be released, and what it would look like for the future of the game, and how it would look for inside of the games. And I think I'm going to structure that a little differently, but I'm going to first talk about the figures. Next, I will talk about how it's structured inside of the game and the game's release style. But to start with, I'm sure you're wondering, what do I mean by figures? As we all know, Skylanders is a Toys to Life franchise. It is known for its ability to bring our toys, these little figurines we purchase for however much they want to sell them for, and putting them on a portal and bringing them to life. That was the huge appeal for the games. This is what made the games fun for us back then, and this is what made most of the profit. But for a remake of the game, and looking at our current video game market, nobody is really in the market for figures, aside from Amiibo, but then again, these are very beloved characters on their own series that you do not have to buy to play as the characters. Because I feel like Amiibo would be long dead if you had to purchase Shulk to play as Shulk in Super Smash Bros. And it would be a huge hindrance on the market if that is how it was structured. But what I would like to propose is a 0-figure Skylanders franchise. Now, of course, they would still possibly make figures that you could purchase through like an online market, or even figures you could use from the past games inside of the new games. But I feel like for newer fans to get into the series, there is going to have to be digital content. You can buy a starter pack, or just the game on the shelves, and it would come with some characters from each of the games that was involved in it, which I will talk about later, but you will be able to buy characters individually. For example, if you were to play SSA, you could buy like the original 4 characters, and they would each be priced at something hopefully moderately, since you don't have to buy a figure as well, and this is assuming Activision is willing to not yank us for arms and legs, but something like $2 or $3 for a core Skylander, which are the normal Skylanders like Spyro, Trigger Happy, Gil Grunt, the more iconic ones. But as you go through the gimmicks, you have Giants, which I would propose to be priced at about $4 to $5, preferably 4, and then Swappers to be priced at 4, then Trap Team, Trap Masters to be priced at 4, the Minis to be priced at maybe $2 or $1, even though nobody likes the Minis to begin with, and then we have the Superchargers, who would be priced at probably $3 because they're basically core Skylanders with vehicle compatibility. Now, that might be a controversial take on the Superchargers topic, but I feel like Superchargers could be priced the same as cores, and then their vehicles be priced as the same as cores, or even less because you're just paying for a car. Now, this is coming from somebody who's not a fan of the Superchargers gimmick, but also enjoys the Superchargers gimmick enough to try to include it. But also, moving on to Imaginators with the Senseis and Creation Crystals. And also, I'm roping traps into creation crystals here for a specific reason with how I propose they be made. But I propose for the Super Senseis, they be priced at 4 like all the other past gimmick Skylanders. But for traps and creation crystals, you can buy the element. For traps, that would mean you can buy each of the trapped masters characters, and you can play through the games, trap them, stuff like that. And you basically buy each element for what I would propose $3 since it's such a big portion of the game, and traps were priced so moderately low in the first place. I feel like pricing $3 for like the light element and then the water element and then the tech element to be a fair trade. Because in my eyes, that's what would be fair. Because you would be normally paying $5 for the traps, but if there are no individual traps and figures, what would you price them at then? You could do a whole package deal and probably make a little bit more money off of some of the other smaller elements like light, magic, chaos at $3. So for the entirety of all of the trappable villains, you would be paying $2 to $3 for each element. So if you do the math, you do 11 because of chaos, and you do that times 3 or times 2, and you would either be $22 or $33 for all the trappable villains. So you're basically paying that much for the individual game or even having them be roped in with the game itself. But now for the can of worms that I feel like would be the hardest to do with digital content. The Imaginators, which are basically customizable characters. But as we all know, the more creation crystals you buy, the more Imaginators you can buy. But what I propose is you can buy each creation character for $2. Now that may sound crazy, just like the traps, but $2 to be able to make your own character that element does not sound that crazy. But also, it allows you to buy an infinite amount of them. For example, if you wanted to have 100 characters, creation characters, without resetting any of your old ones, that's just $200 of your pocket you're willing to spend. But for us, for other people who are not willing to spend that much, you could spend maybe $20 total for one of each, and then you can just reset it. Or if you get really attached to like your dark character but want to make another one, you can buy another one for $2. For example, it will be a price that adds up in value over time for the creation characters, or even the rest of the characters, but is not that much for the initial purchase. Kind of like skins in weapon skins for Call of Duty or even Fortnite skins, where they don't have that high of a price, or can be unlocked through events or battle passes and stuff like that, but they will add up over time, and the more and more you play, the more and more you buy them, the more and more it costs you out of your pocket. Now, of course, this sounds great from a marketing perspective. This sounds great to us fans who would love to play all the characters. It'll be way cheaper than buying them all initially like we do now. It would make it so it's affordable and easy for new fans to get into the game series. And I would suggest a lower price value on the game, something around $30, so there would be more money being able to be put to the figures. Because if you make your game $30 and you allow your figures to be bought for a cheaper price, people are going to buy more and more figures, not realizing how much they've spent on figures alone. Instead of having a $30 game, and then people being like, I'm buying the bare minimum because of how expensive this game was. And it also allows you to be able to put less into the original game itself. But enough for a very controversial topic, because I know a lot of fans would prefer to just see all the figures returned, because that's how we've initially played the game, but that's not how the future of this game would be able to proceed. But moving on from probably the most controversial topic in this video, I would like to get into the game itself, the game releases, because I got into figures, I got into how it would be structured, but now it's time to get into how the games would release. Now, with Spyro and Crash Bandicoot's return, they had a trilogy release with all three of their original games. Because all three of their original games were fairly similar, with different villains, some new features, stuff like that, and something that wasn't too hard to pack into one game from their original release. But with Skylanders, you'll have to deal with new characters, you will have to deal with more characters added on and on and on, but you would also have to deal with new gimmicks and more storage for each of those characters. Which is why I propose an original trilogy release, with the first three games, Spyro's Adventure, Giants, and Swap Force, indicating the $30 price tag, because you're paying for three of the games. But now, you can buy the rest of the games, or even have all the games fused into one, which would be fairly difficult from both a marketing standpoint as well as a storage standpoint. Or you can make the next three games, Trap Team, Superchargers, and Imaginators, be DLC. This would be something structured like a Fallout game or a Skyrim game, having storylines locked behind a deep paywall, which does not sound fun for us Skylander fans and stuff like that, and doesn't sound fun on paper, but if you're going to pay for each individual game at like $100 for a starter pack or $60 for a starter pack, but knowledge that down to just all 6 games for $60, maybe $10 for each game, $10 for each of the DLC, or a pack for them all for $60. And this would get into the marketing aspects or how Activision wants to sell the game, which is something I can't really predict or talk about, but I can talk about how the games will be structured. Because there's one specific detail I would like to talk about. Crossing over between the games. As we all know, all characters from past games are playable in future games. For example, every character from the first 5 games can be played in Imaginators, having every character be playable. In Superchargers, every character except for the Imaginators characters can be played in Superchargers. Trap Team, nobody in Superchargers or Imaginators can be played in that game. But what I'd propose is not a crossover where every character can be played in every game, but for only one group of the characters to be playable. And actually, you can rope in sidekicks and minis with this. But what I would like to suggest for each of the games is cores to be playable in each of them. Because throughout the years, cores have become increasingly worthless to purchase and buy. Because they're weaker versions of gimmick Skylanders. Like at Giants, they were like a fun addition to the roster. They were still useful. You could still play as them. In Swap Force, they seemed less lovable to play as because you would love to play as a swapper more because they have more compatibility with the rest of the game. But then in Trap Team, they got rid of cores, basically. They still had them, new cores, remade cores, but they were basically worthless to play as. They couldn't open elemental gates, they couldn't break Traptanium, they had weaker time against villains, were weaker against the rest of the game. And it became an unfun experience to play as cores as much as it did a Trapmaster. And then in Superchargers and Imaginators, they completely scrapped cores altogether. But what I would propose is having every core playable in each of the games. So, High Five, Flip Wreck, characters from Trap Team, characters from Superchargers, Pop Thorn, and like Bush Bumble Blast, and then characters from Giants, Fright Rider, Hot Dog, all of those, to be playable in each of the Skylanders games. Meaning in SSA, you would have no longer the 32 character roster, but you would be able to play as every single Skylander core ever released. You could play as Blackout, Spotlight, you could play as Popthorn, you could play as Hot Dog, you could play as the original roster of characters, but every core would be playable in that game. Mainly so, the game where cores were it would be the only game where cores existed. And this would also allow options for them to add new cores to the game, new senseis, new other stuff like that, so there wouldn't be as heavy as a market on cores in each of the games, but as for the first few games, there would be a heavy market on cores because of how they were actually playable. And this would also allow for cores to seem less useless, because if a High Five was only playable in Trap Team, why would you buy High Five over a Trapmaster? You wouldn't. But in the past games, you would buy it for the figure, the cheaper price tag, but when it's only $1 off, it doesn't seem as favorable. But if you put those cores into the first game, you would want to buy them so you could play them in the first game, where they would be fun and enjoyable. Which would mean you could add more levels into the game to account for more characters being playable, and then you could also add more of the cores to accommodate for the 2 new elements, the ability to have more creative liberty with having new characters in the game, and more of a new influence for people who used to play the games and are like, but why would I play a game I've already played before with all characters I've played before? But if you made new characters and brought back the old cores to the older games, it would make those smaller games that people have a larger collection of more favorable and more marketable to buy. Which is honestly the best way I could see the games moving forward. With digital content, a DLC-like release with each game being like $10 individually into one hub section. For example, like the NES Arcade and like the Wii U, where you could play a variety of games in the same place, but be able to select out of each of the 6 games that you could purchase individually for like $10, and then the characters to be digitally available. Now, they could bring back figures in some capacity for us older fans, but for the games to continue, I don't think that would be too favorable, or really in the best interest of Activision or even the public from a marketing standpoint. Which is unfortunate, but it's a sad reality we have to live with, that the Skylanders games have to evolve if they are to continue, or they will remain a dead franchise like it currently is now. Oh, But honestly, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys have any questions or anything you would like to see in the next game, please let me know in the comments, because I love reading through ideas you guys have. And even if you disagree with my ideas, this is kind of my opinion, but also how I see most practically the game's continuing from a marketing standpoint, because I really don't see figures coming back in the same capacity they were in the past, which is something I know I got a lot of questions on when I released the 2023 leaked rumors and stuff, because there was a rumor that figures would not be coming back, and that was a huge concern past people had. And honestly, it's probably something I'm going to receive the most criticism on this video for. But honestly, I do apologize for that. But honestly, for the series to continue, I feel like figures are going to have to be either a thing of the past or something of more of a commodity for older fans or people who want the figures. But if you guys enjoyed, I hope to see you guys all next time, because I plan to make some more styled content like this in the future, just more sporadically than what I was hoping to do with daily uploads. But until next time, I'll see you guys all next time. Goodbye!